I fucking love Mass Effect. And when I say that, I'm not referring to the series as a whole, although I am pretty fond of that too. I'm specifically talking about the video game Mass Effect, the first one, which I think is far and away, with no competition, the best game in the series. And I say that despite the numerous inarguable improvements made to the sequels in terms of gameplay tuning and production value polish. This game is just amazing. And with Mass Effect Andromeda looming on the event horizon, now seems like a prime time to talk about why. Let's take a step back though. Mass Effect was an undeniably ambitious project from the get-go, a space opera in video game form that puts you in the shoes of what is essentially a Starfleet commander. It's one thing for a game to go toe-to-toe with Call of Duty, it's another thing entirely to take on Star Wars and Star Trek, especially for a relatively small developer, which BioWare was back in 2004 when the project started. The original Mass Effect did a damn good job of living up to that vision though. It crafted a universe that people fell in love with and wanted to live in. There was definitely room for improvement, the game was pretty janky, but the same can be said of A New Hope and Star Trek the original series. What was most impressive is that despite cribbing from both series, ME very much felt like its own thing. It had its share of fantastical elements, and it was more action-oriented than Trek, but it was also more fleshed out and scientific than Star Wars, with a plot driven more by politics and ideologies than simple monomyth storytelling. It found a good niche in between the sci-fi giants, and further cemented its own identity with heavy elements of Lovecraftian cosmic horror and a few doses of campy B-movie stuff like the Rachni for flavor. When Mass Effect came out in 2007, it left me with the impression that given the proper resources, this could be the start of something generation-defining. Not just a video game like Star Wars, but the Star Wars of video games, with a world that truly lives beyond the small screen. They got those resources with the sequels, as well as a fairly sizable expanded universe of books, comics, spin-off games, and even a theme park ride, not to mention a shitty anime movie that maybe I'll get to one of these days if you guys ask for it. But all of that came at a cost. See, something else happened to BioWare back in 2007. They got bought out by EA, and while that October acquisition came too late for them to fuck with Mass Effect 1, you better believe they fucked with the sequels. Now, when I say EA fucked with Mass Effect, I don't mean that they deliberately tried to make it worse out of malice. That would just be stupid. In fact, I think they had every intention of making it better. They just had no idea how to do that. The problem here is that EA isn't a game studio. It's a big, monolithic corporate entity that just happens to make video games. The difference is apparent in how you describe different companies. Double Fine makes funny games. From Software makes deep, mechanically challenging games. Telltale makes cinematic, story-driven games. EA, Ubisoft, and Activision make games. Period. There's no specific focus. You used to be able to say, EA makes sports sims and publishes lots of other games, but as they swallowed up countless other developers in their rush to expand, they gradually lost that distinction. Now there's nobody who can definitively say, this is what an EA game should be, not even at the top of the company. Now, this problem isn't exclusive to EA. Nintendo seems to be the only big game company that does have any sort of creative direction. With few exceptions, Nintendo games always feel like Nintendo games, which is why they're pretty much the only company in the world that can make something like Smash Bros. Feel cohesive. The rest of the game industry either solves this by applying the same formula to everything, which is why Ubisoft keeps making the same sandbox game, and Activision exclusively crafts Skinner boxes with countless slots for expensive DLC expansions, or by doing what EA does. When the time comes to decide on a corporate level what direction any given EA project should go in, the only places that they can draw answers from are market research and focus testing, which basically means what's worked before and what people think they want. When you look at the original Mass Effect with those two answers in mind, you can build a pretty clear roadmap on how to turn it into a million-selling, critically acclaimed mega hit. It's got third-person shooter elements. Cover shooters are tearing up the charts right now, so obviously we've got to tune the hell out of those mechanics so people want to play Mass Effect over Gears of War or whatever. On the other hand, we've got these segments where you're driving around planets looking for resources. Focus groups don't like those. The car handling is floaty and needs a lot of tuning that won't improve the core gameplay, and they create lots of downtime between the shooting bits that people actually want to play. Axe 'em. And speaking of downtime, man, getting around this Citadel place is a drag. Obviously, people are buying this game for the story. It says so on the back of the box. But getting from conversation to conversation is a little tedious. I think we can pack all these NPCs in a lot tighter with some tweaking, so they don't have to walk around so much. Heck, let's do that to their spaceship too. Those are solid answers to the question of how do we design a better AAA action game. In fact, audiences and critics alike absolutely loved those answers. But as for the question of how do we design a better Mass Effect, personally, I think they're completely fucking wrong. Those are the kind of answers that give us dog shit like Hitman Absolution. Instead of asking, what does the AAA market want, let's start by asking, what is Mass Effect? And if your answer to that question is a third-person shooter with RPG elements and branching cinematic dialogue, I'm going to slap you in the face. If you're struggling, I already gave you the correct answer earlier in this video. Mass Effect is a space opera that puts you in the shoes of a Trek-esque starship commander, searching the galactic frontier for a way to stop an incomprehensible, civilization-devouring cosmic horror. Through that lens, a lot of the decisions made in designing Mass Effect 2 make it objectively worse. Replacing planetary exploration with probes reduces the downtime between action beats, but it also reduces the galactic frontier to a handful of level portals and a pile of balls that you throw darts at. Also, just as an aside, piloting a mini Normandy around solar systems in the galactic map instead of just using a cursor to plot a course from planet to planet might feel better mechanically, but from a lore standpoint, it makes no goddamn sense and is seriously immersion breaking. Driving around in the Mako was undeniably tedious, and the rover handled like shit, but while the planets you landed on were pretty barren, there was still this zen coolness to touching down on the surface of a truly alien world. Hell, No Man's Sky is 90% terrible, and to some people it's still worth it just for that sensation, and Mass Effect actually has dune worms in it. Plus, while the copy-pasted buildings used for side missions on those planets get old pretty fast, I feel like they add a bit of realism to the world. Of course, early colonization of barren planets would be done with mass-produced, modular, prefabricated buildings. That just makes sense. But the problem of removing the Mako segments is a known issue, one that BioWare is purportedly solving for Mass Effect Andromeda with the help of the Need for Speed team. Yet, while I'm excited about that, there are bigger issues, ones that haven't been addressed in any meaningful way, that leave me very worried about the upcoming sequel. And I'm not talking about the ending of Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 1's RPG mechanics were definitely in need of refinement. Its inventory system and stat screen were a mess, but stripping them down to their bare bones takes a great deal away from the experience of being a starship commander. In the original game, you make meaningful choices about what equipment your crew brings into the field, whether you want protection from environmental hazards or health regeneration or simply optimal defense stats from your armor is a big decision. In Mass Effect 2, you customize your armor from a small selection of cosmetic items that provide minor negligible stat bonuses, about half of which are locked into DLC, and choose what color skin you want your companions to wear. In Mass Effect 1, you have to balance improving your team's latent abilities against training them to use specialized equipment. Do you want them to be okay with every weapon or great with just one or two options? In ME2, you just choose which of their cooldown powers has the best numbers. The way ME2 handles it is better if your goal is not to let the boring RPG stuff get in the way of the fun pew pew blam blam, but if your goal is to give players a taste of the logistics of being a starship commander, then cutting stat management is detrimental to the experience. On that note, many of the big design changes to Mass Effect 2 were made in order to improve the shooting and make combat encounters more interesting. And Mass Effect 1 needed that, don't get me wrong. The smoother aiming, improved cover system, and weightier gunplay are all welcome changes in Mass Effect 2 and 3. Heck, even though it makes zero sense in terms of the lore, the change from infinite ammo cooldowns to guns with clips speeds things up and encourages you to break cover more often, which makes for more tense, dynamic shootouts. I'll gladly take a stupid but minor retcon in exchange for a substantial improvement like that. What I'm not so happy about is how this mentality affects the environmental design of Mass Effect 2. The first game's levels are, well, they're sort of objectively bad in terms of conventional shooter design. Their cover placement encourages heavy turtling, they're littered with big, empty spaces, and on the whole, they're very monotonous to navigate. But they also feel like real places that would exist in this universe. And in that sense, ME1 has a serious edge over its sequels. Almost every environment in Mass Effect 2 feels like a video game level, with very obvious distinctions between designated quest hubs and designated shooting galleries. Everything just feels too designed. Like all of the furniture and debris in the environment has been carefully placed to break up your line of sight and create interesting flanking opportunities. At least it has those, though. Again, Mass Effect 1 left a lot of room for improvement. It needed better level design, but the way that everything is purpose-built for the player's convenience makes the environments in ME2 feel fake, and nowhere is that more apparent than on the Citadel. The Citadel is a massive, ancient space station whose strategic location and unparalleled technology makes it an ideal seat of power for the galactic government. As such, it's been retrofitted with modern facilities such as housing and business centers by a massive alien population. It is not an inherently fine-tuned space. By its nature, the Citadel needs to be open and modular to accommodate a wide range of alien tenants. In Mass Effect 1, we see this. The station is made up of sprawling, unwieldy spaces haphazardly packed with market stalls and cramped maintenance corridors that have been converted into dwellings. The level design mirrors the lore. Ostensibly, the same is true of the Citadel in Mass Effect 2, but you wouldn't know it from playing the game. Your interactions with the immense space station are just confined to a balcony in the Presidium and 4 floors of a single ward building where every quest-important NPC just happens to be hanging out. Oh, and there's a few instanced areas where fights can happen, which means, of course, that you get none of those cool moments where assassins ambush you while you're walking around the quest hub that happened in ME1. The streamlining means less walking around and less load times to disguise with elevators, but the trade-off for that is that it feels fake as fuck. As it stands, you'd cut more downtime and arguably lose less immersion by reducing the Citadel to a menu and a series of visual novel cutscenes. Mass Effect 3 at least has the decency to put a different skin on each floor of its Citadel brand mall, but that doesn't even begin to undo its countless other well-documented sins, like how it boils down a universe full of big ideas to a single done-to-death message about the perils of AI, or how its DLC lets you have a face-to-face conversation with the Mass Effect equivalent of an elder god. You are doing cosmic horror wrong, BioWare! The unknown is scary because it is unknown. What the fuck are you even thinking? But I digress. If Mass Effect 1 lets you explore the world of Star Trek, then its sequels let you explore the set of Star Trek, and sometimes play paintball on it. All because the higher-ups chose to prioritize making a fun video game over making an immersive space opera. And if you like that, more power to you. Mass Effect 2 and 3 are fun video games, and I still thoroughly enjoy playing them, which is a lot more than I can say for a lot of things. Heck, I even enjoyed Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, even though it's totally endemic of EA's inability to understand what the series is about. But while I like those games, I love Mass Effect 1, and it bothers me to hear 2 touted as the apex of the series when it carelessly discards so much of what makes the original game great. It may be a relatively gentle slope, but for me, it was all downhill from the first game. I am glad that we have a series of solid space opera themed AAA shooters to play, but I miss the janky actual space opera that started the series off, and I see no reason that it couldn't have been polished into something just as solid as the sequel that we ended up getting, if only the people in charge understood what it was they were dealing with. I don't know if that would have fixed Mass Effect 3's ending, but it couldn't have hurt. With all that said, I'm looking forward to Mass Effect Andromeda, but I do so with trepidation. Shifting focus to an open world could solve many of these problems, but it could also exacerbate them if done wrong. Build too few planets, and suddenly the new galaxy starts feeling like a single tiny island. But that's just my weird geeky opinion, and whether you agree or disagree with it, I want to hear your weird geeky opinions in the comments below. And while you're down there, you might notice a button that says subscribe. Maybe you should click it? I don't know. If you need a bit more convincing, I created a video about how the tutorial design in the new Hitman demonstrates that Square Enix really does get what that series should be in a way that the Mass Effect team seemingly doesn't. And if you want to hear even more of my thoughts, you should follow me on Twitter at G0FFThu and subscribe to my new vlogging channel, Basement Escape. Hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement. Thank you especially if you're one of the beautiful people who supports me on Patreon and makes it possible for me to put together videos like this. Without your funding, I wouldn't have been able to afford the editor who put this whole thing together. So I hope you enjoyed the video. In a very real way, you made it happen.